ACS gas training, how to grease a cooker tap. My name's Alan Hart and today I'm back at Viva Training Academy and I've got Russ with me today, the expert trainer, and Russ is going to go through how to grease a cooker, or how to grease the taps on a cooker. So yeah, let's get over to Russ. This video is for gas safe, registered and trainee gas engineers under supervision. Please comply with the current regulations at the time.
Thank you for that, Alan. For those of you who don't remember me, I'm Russ. I've been in gas industry for over 40 years and in training for 20 plus. Today we're going to look at something that's quite often missed in this in the training. Not missed completely, but not into much depth. And that's something as simple as greasing a cooker tap. Something that needs to be done quite often, and it's something that can be missed because of all the other equipment that we quite often have to look into these days. We're going to look at various taps close up, but in general we're going to work on this particular cooker here. Every cooker, every manufacturer does do it slightly differently, so to get to the actual controls, look at the manufacturer's instructions, because sometimes any engineer will tell you, any experienced engineer will tell you, quite often you do end up with more screws out than you need. Get the front in bits, get the cooker in pieces, and then we'll move on from there. Here we have a very obvious standard cooker, high level grill, storage compartment, and the section we're looking at here is the control taps behind the knobs, if you will. One of the things you can do as you're starting this process is also to look at other safety features. For example, does the door close correctly? That's the oven door bottom. Does the door close correctly? And in particular, are the oven door seals sound? Very important. Not only for the operation of the cooker, but also for the controls we're going to work on. Because if this seal is intact, it will get extra heat, and that extra heat will eventually cause a problem with the taps. It will dry them out. Seems obvious, but it's something that can be missed sometimes. It's something you really need to be aware of. Obviously, this particular cooker, the control taps will just pull off. They all vary slightly. They're all pretty much of a muchness, but different manufacturers, as I said earlier, will do it slightly differently. And they're all obviously the correct. You can't get the wrong one on afterwards, because the oven one, for example, will just flop about because it's a bigger control tap. On this particular cooker, don't always assume it's there. Once you've got the control taps off, again, I will emphasise looking at manufacturer's instructions for these things, because you can end up with more screws out. If I take this out now and have a quick, if I come round the other side to make it easy for you to see what I'm doing, under here there are a number of different screws, and you could soon have 5-6 screws out and actually only need to take 2 out. In this particular case, it's the 2 just underneath here. So if I just drop those 2 screws out quickly with my good eyes, drop those 2 out, excuse the back of my head. Well, we've got those 2 screws out. Always be careful where you put these screws, because you're going to need them back afterwards. Once we've removed those 2 screws, on some cookers you'll be able to just lift that off. On this particular model, you do have to do a slightly different way. You've got to take the top off on this one. So excuse me for rattling. Take those off. On top of here then, we do have 4 screws, and this actually holds the hot plate itself, the complete hot plate, in position. Screws out, secure hot plate. Again, some of these fasten from the rear and just hook in, but this particular model is held down from the top, and that then lifts up and removes. Now, on this particular model, it's a very basic cooker. There are no automatic ignition systems or anything on it. If it did have automatic ignitions, you would also find here where the holes are, there may be igniters. You need to pull the wires off those before you can remove the whole hob. Now we've got the hob off, we can actually access the extra 2 screws in the top here, which we'll put those 2 out. exactly the same as the bottom ones, very similar position, but reversed. Take those two out, and now it should now just come off, and that gives us access to the gas taps. Now then, this is known as a gas rail. There's various names, but it's always normally known as a gas rail, and the taps fasten to the rail. Now in this particular case, it's a fabricated pressed steel affair. Sometimes it's just a half inch BSP pipe with tappings in it. Various ways of doing that gas rail, but the principle's the same. A continuous bar with gas passing through and the taps attached to that bar. Once we've got access to the controls, we can sort of quickly run through the basic controls that we have here. Obviously we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 control taps of very similar design, and the sixth one will be the thermostat. Again, if the thermostat fails and you change it, I'll keep saying this, manufacturing instructions, you'll quite often find 2 or 3 different thermostats listed in their instructions. That's because they get the manufacturers, they'll use different thermostats if they can't access one of the other ones. It might look totally different, but you'll find the connections are in the same place. So don't think if it comes differently when you order it, it's the wrong one. Just check the connections first. Moving across on the side here, this particular cooker uses the injectors from the side and sort of fires into the hob from the side. Some do it from the middle, some do it all separately. Again, all very similar, but all slightly different manufacturers. This particular one has a couple of wires here because it is actually set up for automatic ignition, although the cooker doesn't have it. If you look at the pipe work under here, these all feed to the separate hobs, and at both sides you've got 2 pipes disappearing through the back plate. That end one feeds the grill, and this far end one obviously goes downwards and feeds the oven. Obviously now we're ready for taking the gas appliance into pieces, or we're stripping the gas tap down. We obviously need to disconnect it from the gas. Now most of the cookers nowadays will have some type of PIC. It should be of that larger type, but quite often they use a small micro one. Officially that's not the correct one, but you will find them fitted on here and there. Disconnecting the gas, twist and lift it off that one. So you've got no problem with any gas coming out once you start to strip the taps down. Just on a small point here, people do ask sometimes, is that classed as an isolation valve? Yes it is, in this situation where you can disconnect, move what they call a readily movable appliance to work on it, and you can then plug it back in again. That is effectively your isolation valve. The recommendation is, if you do remove the cooker permanently, i.e. somebody moves from a property, takes the cooker with them, and there may be a delay with the new people coming in, or the new people may have electric cooker, the recommendation is, although that is an approved termination point, the recommendation is you remove that and put a plug in, a proper stop in that pipe work if it's going to be left for a long time. This tap assembly on this particular cooker fastens with 2 screws on the top. Again, as I mentioned earlier, some will fasten underneath, various ways. This particular one sits on the flat part of the rail here. The connections on the back for the gas supply, and there's 2 little screws on the front here. If that's perhaps a little bit clearer, I can point them out there, 2 little screws. And what you'll find is, all of these cooker taps, which you've possibly never thought about before, you've always got to push them in to operate them. That's actually a safety device, believe it or not. It stops people either bumping into them and turning, or children are inclined to just twist, not actually push and turn. So it's something as a safety device. Is that connection, is that little tap, is it working? Do you have to actually activate it? From that point on, inside here, what you'll find is a small spring assembly. Obviously, the tap inside there is what we call a tapered plug. In other words, it reduces from one end to the other, it's tapered. That's so it fits snugly into the hole it's sat in. As the gas comes in from the side, and goes out the back, obviously there's no way of attaching that. You can't sort of nip it up with a knot on the end or something of that description. So what you've got to do is somehow hold it inside the tap assembly. And what they use is a little spring. You can always tell there's the spring there by pushing that. That's the spring holding it in. It's not heavy. It's heavier than, say, a ballpoint pen, but it's not that much heavier. It's just something that holds the tap assembly in place. One thing you must be careful of, though, as you remove this, the screws are very small in comparison to most of the screws on this. Be careful they don't fall, because they are difficult just to replace with anything. They are a little set screw. And also, as you take the tap assembly out, be aware of the position of either the control tap itself or the actual plug inside, the tapered plug inside, because you can get them 180 degrees out. As you'll see when we get inside here, some of them are foolproof, and some of them you've just got to be a little bit careful which way you take them out. Now we're going to strip this particular one down again, as I said before, just make sure the spring assembly is working correctly. Take the screws out. They're only a set of screws. Sometimes these can be quite tight. This has been out a few times in its life, so it's a bit easier. They'll vary in length as well. Now you can see straight away there, as soon as the second one comes out, it starts to want to release itself, which is fair enough. Keep it pressed in if you can, taking the two screws out. Then slowly, I'll put the screwdriver down, slowly release that. Now straight away that's pushing itself out. And that's the spring assembly inside it. This is what I wanted to show you. It just looks like a ballpoint pen spring. Officially it's not, but there you go. And it sits inside there. When you put it back in, it will sit in there, and as you put that back on again, it literally just sits inside, and you can always check is it operating correctly again straight away. Take it back off, put that to one side. Remember which way up it is. The flats are on the top on this particular one. Again, put the spring down safely, because they do have a habit of finding small holes in worktops. And you can see from this now, the easiest way, on this particular one, this has a slot at the bottom. That slot isn't always at the bottom. Sometimes it's various places, different manufacturers again. The easiest way to get this out now is, I use snap nose pliers, just gently twist and it will pop out. Now you can see from that one, it's very dry, very clean, which doesn't help it rotate. So if you look on this now, I'll just wipe it first. Always give it a nice clean, nice wipe. And if you see on here, there are different little tappings. Not the easiest to see, I'll give you that. Little holes, various places. If you think about it, when you turn your control tap on a hob, you can get it into different positions, either for a high flame or a small flame, and various places in between. And that's why it has different holes, and these can vary again depending on what the appliance is doing. Again, this is exactly the same thing as what's on a gas fire, but in that case it's just firing to different amount of radiance. The principle is the same, different holes in various places. And as you saw before, I cleaned it with just a piece of tissue, doesn't have to be anything special. What you're looking for, any scratching, any grooves that might cause a problem, that's quite good. And also, has anybody put too much grease in? You can put too much grease and effectively block these holes up. You need very little grease. Once you're happy that the barrel itself is sound, in other words no scratches extra, we've cleaned all the excess or old grease out of it. This is quite clean, it's been done a few times. We then need to re-grease it. Now the grease is a personal thing, as long as it'll take the temperature. You can either use the older, what we used to call graphite grease, like a black grease, or you could use a modern silicone grease, as long as it'll take the temperature and it's suitable for the application you're using. I've gone more these days towards the silicone, mainly because it's cleaner. The old graphite grease, really, really good, but can get a little bit on the mucky side. So I use as they call it, a silicone, high temperature silicone grease. Now if you can see on here, I've got far too much on my finger, but you're not going to put all that on. You're going to put a very small amount here and there, just a touch here and there, put the rest back into your container, and then slowly wipe it round, and you're looking to touch everywhere but not get it excessively around the holes or the tapping, shall we say. And it's just nicely around there, and that's ready then to go back into the hole. From that point you can then sit it back in, obviously trying to put it back in the correct way up. From that point of view you can literally get hold of your pliers and just gently rotate it just to make sure. Now what I would always do at that point is take it back out again, have a look to make sure I haven't got any excess grease into the holes. I'm happy with that, I haven't put too much on, there's more than enough. And then plonk it back in again. Again, just rotate it and put it approximately where you want to be. Once we're happy that the tap assembly is clean, greased and moving nicely, we can then reassemble the tap. Just like they say on the other things, it's a reversal of what we've already done. We've got the tap back in, hopefully somewhere in the correct position. We need the valve itself, the tap assembly itself, and of course, always remember to put the spring back in. Now you've got to put it into the tap assembly first on this particular one. Again, sometimes they'll fit the other way around, but everyone's slightly different. Get it sat in there snug. Make sure you get that into the same place. Bad to see on these things, but there's a little lug that goes into the slot at the bottom. That's the bit that turns it. Sit it on gently. You've got to get it into position. And again, always, all the time you're doing this, just be checking, is that turning properly? Because you quite easily jam these up. And I think I'm going to turn that over myself, actually. That way. Up, no, that's correct, that way. See, don't be frightened, taking it back off and just checking, is it in the correct position? That's better, that's better. Now once you've got it in position, you can then put your first screw in. Now remember with these screws, they are only a small screw, little set screw usually, in fact always, almost always anyway, never say always. And screw those back up. Hold it in position as you go along, just get it somewhere near, don't tighten them both up, tighten one nearly there and then the other one, and slowly draw it in, always checking all the time that that's still loose, and now these screws need to be nicely nipped, they don't need to be over tightened because they will damage, especially on this type of a tap. This is an alloy one, it's all alloy, the barrel's alloy, the tap assembly itself alloy. You can get exactly the same thing that's in brass. The valve itself brass, the tapered plug-in side's brass. It's all the same thing but brass or alloy. But the alloy ones will strip easily if you're not careful. So just nicely nip it. And of course, remember what I said before. Always check, is it working? And you should be able to turn that with your hand now, even if it was tight originally. Once we're happy we've got the assembly back together again, we're all more than happy with that one. Obviously we need to make sure we've got it connected up correctly. So put the gas supply back in. Remembering this is a black and white fit in, plug it in. We've now got gas back to the cooker. You can either use the aerosol type LDF, leak detection fluids. I prefer the ones you mix, just a personal thing. And just check anywhere you may have disturbed around there. And always just to also turn it and check, just to make sure everything is as it should be. Have a close look, have a look round. Remember, of course, you should always use a proprietary, however they word it, leak detection fluid. You can't use washing up liquid, it is detergent and it can damage certain components. So you should always use a correct one. Have a look round, make sure everything's sound, everything's okay. And from that point on, you can then reassemble the non-gas parts. What I would always do is just wipe the excess wet off before you carry on with the other parts. Thanks very much. I'm going to pass you back over to Alan just to finish off. Thanks very much.
Thank you for that, Russ. I'd like to thank Viva Training Academy for all the help and support and doing these videos with us to help you guys. Please add a like and add a comment below if you can. and that'll be great. Thank you for watching.